Good morning. This is a video I'm recording about my puzzle called Psycho Alien. This puzzle is one that has had one independent solve, though I've had a couple of people run through the break-in logic with me. I created this as another in the series of my Psycho Killer puzzles, and I originally intended it to be my first. It's my first one that doesn't use just killer rules, and I intended it to be fairly easy. The one that came out turned out to be a diabolically hard puzzle, which is why I think it's only had one independent solve. And because I'm looking at posting this puzzle, and people are apparently struggling to find the break-in, I thought what I would do is while I posted this, I would also post the solve video at the same time, so that if people did get stuck, they could then use this video as a way of potentially unsticking themselves. Because one of the things that I think should happen is people should have access to hints for incredibly hard puzzles, and this is my way of doing that. If you don't think it's a good idea, then don't look at the video, and my recommendation is go away. But in a nice way. So this is my Psycho Alien puzzle. This, as I said, this is a continuation of my Psycho Killer puzzles, which use these Psycho Killer cages. The others have all just used normal killer rules. I'll explain how these work. So as it states in the rules there, these red cages are Psycho Killer cages. The way they work is, with a normal killer cage, what would happen is you would put, say, to total 14, you would put, say, an 8 and a 6 into the cage, and that would total 14. With a Psycho Killer cage, what each of these cells does is they refer to a cell in a different cage. Well, they refer to a cell in a different box, or in a box. So, for example, this is box 1, this is box 2, this is box 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if you were to put, say, a 2 into this, then what it will do is it won't take the 2 as the value for the summing to 14, but you will look at box 2 and you will look at the cell in the same position in box 2. So you will look at this cell. And if you were to put, say, a 7 in here, now these only sum to 9, but you're not summing those two cells, you're summing that cell, being the cell in the same position in box 2, and you're looking at that cell, being the cell in the same position as that one in box 7. So those two cells would have to sum to 14. Similarly, if we were to reverse this and make this 7 and 2, you wouldn't be looking at the same two cells, you would instead be looking at that cell and that cell. I've got an example here. So this is using my this is where I did one with killer, and this is a solvable 4x4. So this is a 9 cage, this is a 7 cage, this is a 3 cage, and you can see that in this needs to sum to 3. The values in there actually 7, but this is 4, so it points to box 4 and grabs this 1. This is a 3, and yes, this is a 3 cage, so it needs to point to a 1 and a 2. This is a 3, and it points to this 2. They're actually highlighted. So while the value in the cage is 7, it's pointing to 2 cells which sum to 3. So that's how the Psycho Killer cages work. And apart from that, all of the thermos are normal. So the thermos do not use the refer digits, they use the digits that are actually placed in the box. So with that, I'm going to go through and explain how this puzzle works, because before I start, I wish to thank Sotek from the Cracking the Cryptic Discord server. He has made it possible for me to make this puzzle, good or bad. You can decide. But he is the one who helped me test the break-in and confirm and find that all of the logic was good, and actually make sure that what I was doing was flowed and was unique. No computer can solve psycho killer cages. There's no solver that is designed to do that. So we've had to test this one manually through quite thoroughly. With that, we will get to how to solve this puzzle. So the first thing we need to look at is this 3 cage. This is a, because we need to put 3 referrer digits in here, and the total they need to get has to sum to 3, then they need to get 3 ones. There is no other way of getting to 3. It has to point at a 1, point at a 1, and point at a 1. This is also all in the top row. So we need to get a 1 from the top row here, a 1 from the top row here, a 1 from the top row here. So that means that one of these is going to have to be a 1, a 2, or a 3. One of these is going to have to be a 4, a 5, or a 6 to get from here. And one of these is going to have to be a 7 or an 8 or a 9 to go from here. Now, because of these thermos, we can see fairly quickly that the 7, 8, or 9 has to go in the middle. Because if you put a 7, 8, or 9 on these thermos, it will just break. That means that the 1 has to come from the top middle box of box either 7, 8, or 9. You cannot put a 1 partway along a thermo, so you almost immediately get an 8 and a 1, because you need to point to a 1. It can't be there, it must be there. That becomes an 8. And you get 2 digits almost immediately. From now on in, this gets much more tricky. So we know from here, one of these 2 has to come from 1, 2, and 3 to get it from up the top, and one of them has to come from 4, 5, or 6. You can't get 2 from up here because you would have 2 1s in the row. So looking at this thermo, you can immediately eliminate 6 from both of these, because you would go 6, 7, 8, 9, and you'd have to put higher than 9 along the thermo. Same is true on the other thermo, they are symmetrical. So you can remove 6. If you were to put 5 into either of these, they would be pointing at themselves and contributing the 5 itself to the value in the psycho killer cage. Because if I put a 5 here, it would be pointing at box 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It would be pointing at itself. The value it would get would be 5, and 5 is greater than 3. You cannot put a 5 in a 3-cell cage. So neither of these can be 5. This now means that the value it gets from this row, where it gets the 1, must be in box 4. So the 1 must be in one of those 2 cells, because it can't get it from the middle one, and couldn't because of the thermo anyway. So it must get it from one of those 2 cells, which means neither of these can be a 1. Because neither of these can be a 1, then the 1 must come from one of those 4 cells, and this can't be a 1, so that cannot be a 3. And that is how you can get the initial population of the of this psycho killer cage, and determine the potential possibilities of the positions of the 1s. There's a couple of ways of going from here. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to now use my method for filling out the values of the thermos along here. So in here we can have 3, 4, 5, and 6. In here we can have 4, 5, 6, and 7. In here we can have 5, 6, 7, and 8. And in here we can have 6, 7, 8, and 9. So they're the possibilities that you can have in these thermos now. So the next thing to look at is actually the restriction that this cage places on these 2 cells. These are 2-length thermos. They don't look very restricted at all, but these 2 cells in particular are quite restricted. Because of these thermos, you cannot put 8s in either of those cells, and because of this 8, you cannot put 8 in any of those cells in row 5. So the 8 in row 5 must go into one of those 2 bulbs. Excuse me. Now, the thing that we need to look at now is what happens with 2 and 3. If you put a 2 onto, well, we know that one of these thermos must start with a 4 because it must provide this one. So it is important to remember throughout the entire break-in and most of the puzzle that one of these thermos must start with a 4. So if we start one of these thermos with a 2, it will mean there is a 2 in one of these boxes. You will not be able to put a 2 into this row because there'll already be one in the box. You cannot put a 2 into one of those positions because it will not fit on the thermo. So the only place left for a 2, if one of these is a 2, is at the end of the rows in those base of the thermos. The same is true if you put a 3 here, because if you put a 3 here, this becomes a 4. All of these will be higher than 3 or 4. All of these will be higher than 3 or 4. There will be a 3 in the box already, so you will not be able to put a 3 anywhere in those cells, and you'll be forced to have a 3 in there. So we've learned a couple of things from here. These highlighted cells, these 2 here, will be either 8 and the value other than 4 that we put in here. So if we end up with a 2 in there, this will be 8-2. If this is 8-2-4, this will be 8-2. And if this is 8-2-3, this will be 8-3. That's an important thing to remember for solving this puzzle. The next part of the break-in is to notice that now we've eliminated 1 from these the end possibilities. It couldn't be there because 1 had to be there, but we can no longer put 1 here. So because we can't put 1 here, 1 is eliminated from this row, 1 is eliminated from this row, 1 can't be that far along a thermo, 1 must be down here. This means because of all of this, 1 must be in one of those 2 cells, and because you cannot put 9 partway along a thermo, 9 must be in one of those cells. Now the question happens, what happens if you put a 2 into one of these 3 cells? If you put a 2 into one of these 3 cells, what you'll end up with in here is a 1, 2, 3, because this will become 3, 4, because you put the 2 in here. 1, 2, 3, 8, 9 quintuple. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9 quintuple will be, not quintuple, sextuple will be in here. So these will consist of 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9. The digits you haven't used in that are 5, 6, and 7. And that would force 5, 6, and 7 into the bottom of box 5. If this becomes a 5, 6, 7 triple, both of those cells have to be 8. So you cannot put a 2 into the bottom of that, into the middle of that row. It just does not work. It will break both of those cells. So if you do that, it doesn't work. So 2 cannot go there because of the thermos, there because of the thermos, there because it will break both of those cells. So 2 must go into one of those ends, because we know it can't be 2, 3, because the 8 is forced into the end. That takes the 3 out of the end. We've already proven that whichever number goes with the 8 in here has to be paired with the 4 in here. That takes the 3 out of here, and we've got a 2, 4 pair. We can now look at the same situation for what happens if we put 3 in here. If we put 3 in here, we end up with exactly the same sextuple, and we end up having to put 5, 6, and 7 in here again. Both of these have to be 8, and that breaks the puzzle. So that means 3 must be not in this middle row, and has to be at the bottom. There's a couple of deductions we can make at this point. Because one of these thermos must start with a 4, it means that 4 will immediately knock anything lower than 5 off. So we don't know which side it is, but let's say it's this side. We can pick a side. It really doesn't matter. So let's say it's this side. So let's say this is the 2 and this is the 4. If this is the 4, this is going to knock anything lower than a 5 off this thermo. We know that we can't put 3 in the middle, and this one will be a 2. So if you put a 2 on this thermo, this must be a 3, because this will have to be at least a 5, this will have to be higher than a 5. So that means that this forces this to be a 2, 3. And also, once you've done that, because these will have to be higher than 4, there's no 4 in these, there'll already be a 4 in this box, so you won't be able to put a 4 there. Whichever thermo starts with a 2 must go 2, 3, 4. We don't know what happens after that, but the thermo because of the restriction on row 5, whichever thermo starts with a 2 is a 2, 3, 4, then something. So one of them starts with a 4, one of them starts 2, 3, 4. We've now got some other interesting stuff we can very quickly determine about the central box. Because we've got 8, 2, 4 in here and 1, 9 is fixed, we have 5 cells locked out of this. So these must be 3, 5, 6, or 7. We can't use 1, we can't use 2, we can use 3, we can't use 4, we can use 5, 6, 7, we can't use 8, and we can't use 9. So this is a 3, 5, 6, 7. This means we have a 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 quintuple in row 6. So the rest of the cells in row 6 are a quadruple of 1, 2, 4, and 9. And we know that those ones cannot be 1. So we've got a 2, 4, 9. These cells can only be 2, 4, 9, and these cells can only be 1, 2, 4, and 9. So this is the start of the first part of the break-in. There is one more tricky step in the break-in, and then the puzzle just becomes hard. So this puzzle, apart from this, we haven't used any of these cages with differing values. So far, this puzzle looks to be symmetrical, apart from the fact that the 4 forces the 1s into these different positions. So while this is a 1, 2, 4, 9, this is only a 2, 4, 9. And that's done by this 3 Psycho Killer cage, and it was one of the first things that was done. That asymmetry is what causes the rest of the break-in to work. So these thermos, one of them has to be an 8. So we know that one of these 2 cells has to be a 9. That means there is a restriction on one of them is actually not possible. And the pressure is actually caused by the fact that this 2, 4, 9 is much more restricted than this 1, 2, 4, 9. And the way that works is as follows. I will actually do it by putting digits into the grid, and then I will roll back because I'm trying to explain the break-in. I think it is seeable I think it is seeable without actually putting the digits in, but this is a diabolically hard puzzle, and I acknowledge that, and that is why I am doing this video alongside it. This will be going up as a 5 out of 5 difficulty puzzle. What happens if you put an 8 onto this thermo? So if you put an 8 onto this thermo, this becomes a 9. This becomes a 2, 4 pair. You take 9 out of here. We've already proven that whichever thermo starts with a 2 must go 2, 3, 4. So that proves this cannot be the thermo that starts with a 2. So this will become the thermo that starts with a 4. So this will have to be the 4 because I cannot put a 4 in that cell for this one to be the 2, 3, 4. We've now got 2 8s in here, which means that that's a 2. But what's more important is if we look here, the only place left for an 8, because that one's knocked out, the other place left for an 8 in row 6 is here, which makes that a 9. This cell now sees both an 8 and a 9, and must be a 6 or a 7. And this thermo, if we put minimum values in, is now broken. And that's all because of the extra restriction caused by there not being able to be a 1 over, and that not being able to leave a 4 in this cell because you don't have the extra freedom that you do on this side. So if I roll it back, it means that if you put an 8 here, you put a 9 here, making a 2-4 pair, meaning this must be a 4 because you can no longer put a 4 in here. That 8 means that that's an 8, means that that's a 9. There is an 8-9 looking here, and you've got a 4 and a 6-7 at the end, and this thermo is broken. I admit that is incredibly hard to see, but I like the logic, and I did want, rather than make this puzzle easier, I thought I would just post this as an incredibly hard puzzle and provide this video as assistance. But what it does mean is that has to be a 2, that has to be an 8, that has to be a 9. There is no 8 in there anymore, means that has to be an 8, that has to be a 9. And from this point on, I actually struggle still a little with this puzzle because I haven't practiced it as much and my scanning gets bad. We have 9s, we have 8s, we have, now you get to see me struggle with trying to solve a puzzle. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. My recommendation is if you've gotten this far, this is the bit of the puzzle I think is just diabolically hard. And this is the point where I would recommend that if you're just completely stuck, stop and now try and solve the rest of the puzzle on your own and come back if you are if you're stuck again. But as I said, I believe this is the bit that is going to cause most people to get completely stuck. So good luck from here on in. I think it is, I won't say approachable, but I think it is a much easier puzzle. That is the bit that I think was just completely diabolical. But as I said, now be prepared to just sit and watch me fail my own puzzle. So this being a 9 now means that this can't be a 9. So this can't be a 7. So this is now can't be a 6 or a 7. This can't be a 5 or a 6. And all of a sudden, this is the 2 thermo, which we now know starts 2, 3, 4. That makes this the 4 thermo, which means this can't be a 3 or a 4, and this can't be a 4 or a 5. And we've actually got quite a bit of information already. We've been able to determine which thermo is which by doing the elimination on these little 2-cell thermos. It takes a 3 out of there, takes a 4 out of there, takes a 4 out of there. There's a lot of just little eliminations, and I'm trying to remember what they all are. So I actually am a fan of marking long thermos when we get to them. 2, 3, and I don't know if it's possible to see all of that without it. 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 7, 5, 6, 7, 8, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's not a 9, that's not a 9 or a 4, that's a 1-2 pair, of course, so that becomes a 4-9. What was next? These are 5, 6, and 7. There is a 5, 6, 7 triple here, but that does not help me. I should have practiced this more. I did this much faster last time. If this was 65432, that would not work. This cannot be a 6, because that would break this. 65432 means that there would be no value to put in there. Where can 8 go in this row? It can only go in one of those two cells, which takes 8 out of those two cells. Ah, 7 has to be in one of those two, so 7 can't be there. So that must be a 7. This can't be a 7. If that's not a 7, that's not a 6. We know 3 has to go up there, but that's not that helpful. Oh, of course. This, I missed the most important thing. This is a 2, and we know that this has to point to a 1. So that's the 1. I always do this. This is a 4, and we know that points to a 1. So that's a 1. That is not a 1. So it was, I'd forgotten my own basic rule. So that gives us those ones. That means that 1 is in one of those two, because we can't put a 1 that far along the thermo, and 1s are not there. That forces a 1 into down here, forces a 1 across here, and that 1 forces a 1 into that cell. So now we've got a bunch of 1s in the grid. That 1 now restricts 1 in this column. So the only place left for a 1 is here. That has to be a 2. And now we've got an interesting relationship happening in these cells. But there's a couple of things we need to do first. This is pointing at that cell. Yeah, that's not helpful yet. We know 2 is up here. 2 is in one of those two. There's 5, 6, or 9. Is our 3, 5 or 6, but that's... I knew this is where I was going to get stuck. Where can 2 go in that column? 2 can't go there, 2 can't go there, 2 can't go in that box, 2 can't go that far along the thermo. That's a 2. If that's a 2, this is not a 2. That now only leaves one space. Oh no, there's now, yeah, that can't be a 2, so this is a 2. And this being a 2 leaves only one space for 9 in this column. So this becomes a 9. That means this is not a 9, this is not an 8, this is not a 7, this is not a 6, this is not a 5. Okay, that's the bit I keep forgetting. Now, this is when this psycho killer cage comes into its own. So we know this is pointing to box 2. So this is pointing at that cell. So that cell needs to contribute to this 8 sum. This cell is going to be the other one. So this will either be a 6 and point to itself as a value of 6, or it will be a 5 and point to that cell. So if this is a 4, this needs to, if it was a 6, it would be 4 and 6, and that's not 8. If it was a 5, this would need to point to a 4, and there's no 4 possible there. So this cannot be a 4. If this was a 3, then this would need to point to a 5. Now, if this was a 6, it would point to itself and be a 6, and the total would be 9, not 8. If this was a 5, then it would need to point here. But in order for it to get the 5 it needs, this would also need to be a 5, and I would be putting a second 5 into this row, which doesn't work. You can't have 2 5s in the row. So if this was a 3, I would need 2 5s, and that does not work. So this cannot be a 3, meaning that's a 2. This is pointing to a 2. So this needs to point to a 6. There's no other value this can point to. If this is a 6, it points to itself, and that's perfectly fine. It's got its 6. If this is a 5, this needs to be a 6, also possible. But it does mean that one of those 2 cells needs to be a 6, and we can take 6 out of there. Now, this is pointing there. That's not in yet. I can unhighlight that because we just know that one of those 2 needs to be a 6, and we've already got that. And if that's a 6, that's a 5. In this column now, there is only one position for a 3, because that 2 means that that can't be a 3 anymore. So you can't put a 3 into any of those. So that becomes a 3, and there is no 3 there. This becomes a 5, 6 pair. Now in this column, there is only one place for a 9. You can't put a 9 part way along a thermo, and that 9 knocks the 9 out of there. So that becomes a 9, that becomes a 4. That 4 knocks a 4 out of there. Um, 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 as I said, this is not an easy puzzle, and I fully acknowledge that. I struggle. Pardon me, I need to get a drink. Coffee, the nectar of life. Um, okay, so these two are now known. So, and this is pointing to itself. So we've now got a 4 in here. So this is a 13 cage. This 4 is pointing to box 4 and is contributing to itself. So this 8 must point to the other value and must point to a 9. So in box 8, the same cell must be a 9. So that takes 9 out of there. I've normally made a lot more reductions around here, and I'm not seeing what I've missed. Normally that 9 gives me other digits, and I've missed something. After the break-in, there are multiple ways, there are multiple paths you can follow. And every time I do this, I seem to find a different one, which means I'm not seeing the same things. Right. We've now got 1, 2, and 9 locked into those columns. So this has to be 1, 2, and 9, which means this is a 1 and this is a 2, 9 pair. That locks 1 into one of those. While that may look useful for that cage, there's not enough information about those cells yet to be able to do anything really with the 10 cage. Eight must be in one of those two in the column, so that cannot be an 8. If that's not an 8, then that is an 8. Because it's the only place left in the column. There's a whole heap of stuff like that, and I keep struggling to spot it. Twos. There are 4 2s looking into this box, so that becomes a 2. Oh, this Thermo. What am I talking about? This Thermo has been restricted for ages. This is a 4, so this can't be a 3. This can't be a 4 or a 5. This can't be a 5 or a 6. This has to be a 7. There is no 7 here. This is why I'm nervous to release this puzzle out into the wild. it's solvable. Talk about dead air. I'm pretty certain it's not this yet. This is a 1. This becomes a 2 or a 9. And we know it can't be a 2. But it only can't be a 2 if this is a 1. And we don't know for sure that's a 1. I thought I was able to lock. Right, 9 is not able to be in any of those. 9 is in one of those two, which means that's a 9. This is not a 9. That's a 5, 6 pair. I don't know that that helps much. Seven is in one of those two. 9 and 9 forces 9 into one of those two. Except it can't be there. So that becomes a 9. That makes that a 1. This is not a 1. This is a 1. And we now know that that number is contributing to the 14 cage. So with this number contributing to a 14 cage, this number will have to contribute to, well, whatever goes in there will contribute to the other one. Can we narrow that down? Not sure yet. I'm not sure if this 10 cage helps us yet. 5, 6, 7. Well, we now know this is a triple, which is 2, 3, 4. This can't be 2. So that's a 2. That's a 3, 4 pair. I'm sorry, everyone. I've deliberately solved this several times to try and not be this slow at it, and I have forgotten everything overnight. That 2 makes that a 9 and that a 2. which makes that a 9, that not a 9. Oh, I keep forgetting this Thermo. That's 7 makes that a 6, which makes that a 5, which makes that a 4. This is not a 4. This is not a 5. The only place left in this column now is for an 8 is there. There is no 6 in either of those because of that 6. How stupid was that? This is not a 6. Right, this is now pointing to a 9. So this has to point to a 1. And I think this cell is limited. This isn't the way I normally solve this puzzle. 1 can't be a 1, can't be a 2, can be a 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. If it was a 3, it would point at an 8, but 8 plus 9 is not 10. If it was a 4, it'd be a 2. 4 plus 9 is not 10. If it was a 5, it'd be a 1. That's okay. If it was a 6, it would be a 3, but 3 plus 9, so this becomes a 5 or a 7. Because I can't put a 1 in there. So this becomes a 5, which means that's not a 5, that's not a 5. So we've got 4 and 6, 4, 6, 7 in there. Neither of these are 5s. This becomes 3, 4, 6, 7. So we can now look at this 14. This one is pointing at a 6, 7. I know there's, as I said, there's a couple of paths through this. So if this is a 6, this has to point to an 8. If it was a 3, it would be pointing to itself. You can never put a 3 into this 14 cage because this would have to point to an 11. If you put a 4 in this, this would need to point to a 10. That does not work. So this is either pointing at that cell or that cell. If this was a 6, it would be pointing at a 4, and this would have to point at a 10. That does not work. This is a 7. So this is that cell plus that cell. So if this is a 6, this is an 8. If this is a 7, this is a 7. So this has to be a 7 or an 8, and it can't be a 7. So this is an 8, this is a 6. This is a 4, this is a 3. This is not an 8. That 6 makes that a 5, makes that a 6. This can no longer be 4, 5, that's 7. These two cells are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. This is a 4. There's no 3 here. This is a 3. This is 6, 7, and 8. That can't be 7. This column needs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not a 7. In fact, these are 4 and 6, and we know the order, 4 and 6. There's no 6 here anymore because of this 6, so that makes that a 6, which makes that a 7, which makes that a 5, which makes that a 7. I think I get the feeling that was doable earlier. There is no 7 there anymore. This becomes a 6-8 pair. I've done this at times where I've got a lot of this stuff way earlier. This is 3, 5. So this is 1, 2, 3. That's a 4, which makes that a 3, which makes that an 8, which makes that a 4. This column needs a 3 and a 6, which makes this is now a 5. This is a 6. There is no 6 here because we've got the 6 for referred to here. So this 2 is pointing at a 2. This 6 is pointing at itself, which gives us the 8 we need. This 7, 1. This 7 is pointing at the 8. The 1 is pointing at the 6, which gives us 14. 5 is pointing at the 1. The 2 is pointing at the 9, which gives us the 10. 8 is pointing at the 2. 4 is pointing at itself. No, sorry, 8 is pointing at 9. 4 is pointing at itself, which gives us the 13. So that is all working. 3, 5. This has to be 6 or 8. It's the only thing missing, and it can't be 8. So that's a 6. That's an 8. That's a 6. This needs to be 3 or 7. That gives us a 3, 7 pair. So that becomes a 6. That becomes a 3. That becomes a 7. That becomes a 3. That becomes a 7. This box needs 5 and 8, which we can do. 8 and 5. This becomes a 7. There is no 7 here, and we end up with a 3-5 deadly pattern, except for the fact that we've got this psycho killer cage. This needs to sum to 30. This is a 7. This is a 9. This 8 is pointing to itself. That is 7, 8, and 9, summing to 24. This needs to point to a 6 in order to get to 30. If we use the 3, we're pointing at a 7. If we use the 5, we're pointing at the needed 6. That becomes a 5. That becomes a 3. That becomes a 5. That becomes a 3. And that is how you solve Psycho Alien, the puzzle that I have designed. I am aware that it is an incredibly hard puzzle, and this is why I wanted to provide my solution video to people who are attempting to solve the puzzle in case they got incredibly frustrated and wanted some assistance. I hope that you enjoy the concept of the puzzle, and if you were able to solve it without assistance, then congratulations, and thank you very, very much for trying my puzzle. Thank you.